yoga block, or you could use a short foam roller if you have it. If you don't have any of those, you can just do all the exercises without. No worries. We're going to use the foam roller for some balance stuff mostly. So as needed. Obviously, if something doesn't feel good, feel free to skip it, go into a modification that works for you. Other than some water, I think that's about it. We'll get started. Let's do a little standing warm up here. So we're going to play with kind of postural stack today as we do our warm up and just how our joints move, and then we'll take it down onto the mat. So the first one is feet. So you can kind of check out your feet, bring them a little bit underneath you here. Bend your knees just a little bit, and then I'm just going to have you do like a little shift from side to side. And so my knees are kind of shifting as well. You'll notice they kind of swing from right to left side. And you're just noticing what's your range of motion from side to side. So why do we do Pilates, right? Strong core, strong trunk. Proximal supports all the distal ends. But the other thing is it's about posture balance, right? Whether it's just like improving your posture, or if you have a sport that works certain muscle groups, or like an injury that you're recovering from. So we want to assess essentially all of our mobility at different joints and how it moves. So ankle range of motion can inhibit hip range of motion. So like kind of cool to check out and see how the feet move. And then once you've kind of found the middle of both feet, so kind of explored both ends, do a little shift front to back, like a little toe lift and a little heel lift. And again, you can keep the knees kind of soft. And what I want you to notice with this is, do you have one direction that you find, oh, I like really have to shift a lot to get my weight forward, or I have to shift a lot to lift my toes? And that can kind of tell us about how the rest of our trunk is stacking on top of our feet. And so once you kind of found that a couple of times, find a place where you feel pretty in the middle. So you could like step in any direction at any point in time. So it feels pretty well-rounded between those 4 points. Nice. And then let's look at your knees next. So knees, we tend to hear don't lock our knees, right? So they can bend and they can straighten. So I want you to straighten your knees, and straighten your knees so much that your weight shifts to your heels. So for most of us, that's typically going to be our locked position, right? It feels like it's hard to move. You have to bend them before you start to walk. So a good way to distinguish between, we don't want to just have bent knees all the time. If you've got your foam roller, you can use this for support, is taking a heel raise. You can also do it without the foam roller, is just pushing to lift your heels. So when your legs are straight, this is your active straight to be able to lift your heels. So you've got your quads engaged, which is what we want. So it's protecting the patella. It's really hard to lock our knees and lift our heels, right? We're going to have this really crazy kind of bending posture. We're going to be like sitting in the front of the hips. So active straight is what we want for balance and to support the knees. So kind of cool, understand ankles, knees. Next joint is the hip joint. And this one's kind of the hardest one, hip disassociation, when we get to the mat. So I want you to kind of think about how these movements affect your plane standing. When we take them down, you can apply them kind of in the same way. So we have kind of our movement of the hip joint. If you've got your hands kind of right at your hip bone here, pubic bone, like a little triangle, karate chops, you're going to shift forward with a flat back and just crease right at your hip joint. And so there's this like fold that kind of naturally happens. It's okay if your knees have to bend. And we want to be able to separate our thigh and our pelvis. So I should be able to separate these two pieces. And sometimes they move together, right? And an example of that would be like, if I move back, my knees bend. And if I move forward, my pelvis rounds and my low back rounds. If you're not sure if you're doing it, your foam roller comes into handy here. So you can bring your foam roller along your spine. So you'll have it kind of bum and all the way up to the back of your head if it's long enough. And you can feel where it keeps your body pretty upright. So you're gonna rotate forward. So I'm just hinging forward rather. My tailbone sticks out, but I'm keeping my upper back against the roller. And it should kind of feel like your bum sticking out a bit, like your sits bones are opening. And so this is your pelvic movement. So my pelvis and my femur are rotating on one another. Here's my flexion. This is the same motion as when we do a tabletop. So when we're doing our ab work, it's the same crease at the front of the hip. It's also the same crease as when I take a squat. So if I have my hands back in my hips again, if I take a little knee bend here, I should feel like I get this really nice crease at the front of my hips. Right? And it should feel really easy on the knees. The knees tend to be kind of in the middle. So if we don't let the pelvis break, it's going to feel like a ton of hip flexors, the quads, and the knees. So that's kind of one of our motions. The other motion at the hip joint, again, if you want to use your foam roller for balance, you can. We're going to find our feet in that nice centered position. We're going to do a little reach out to the side. So this is like your side glute work. So hip abduction and adduction. Really hard to move the leg in this direction if our pelvis is really tucked or our weight is really back in our heels. We just lose the range here. Yeah, nice. And it should feel like it's kind of a bit of work, not like maybe anything crazy, but a little bit of work kind of in the outer hip here. If you think about where like a swimsuit line would be, and you can try the other side for a couple. So we'll give a couple, just kind of finding what is that range. You can use your foam roller if you want. And I want you to start to notice, okay, now that we've added the hips in, we've got foot position, knee position, and hip. So what's happening in those other places that we just kind of touched on? And all of this is our postural stuff. So we're isolating through the chain. It affects how we stand and how we move in the world. So it's pretty cool. And then something that maybe you did as you started to balance without thinking about it is where your rib cage is. So if my rib cage is really far behind me, right, it pulls my weight back and it kind of turns off all of my working muscles. If I can stack my rib cage on top of my hips, my abs turn on. So we've got this nice alignment, but also now suddenly, okay, my knees are actively straight, not locked, feet's nice and evenly weighted. I've got this full motion through the hip. So take a little twist here. We'll kind of move the ribs a bit. You can step a little wider. We're just gonna do a nice sweeping twist. And as you twist, let all of your joints move. So yeah, we're thinking about rib cage, but integrating this movement into a twist and finding some breath here. So with our stack, right, we might notice that we've got certain areas in our torso that get really tight and stiff, maybe like upper back, or you notice low back. Side bending and twisting are two really great ways to start to open up those spaces. They can kind of separate the ribs and the hips if they get glued and kind of compressed by gravity. And then keep your feet wide. We're gonna sweep one arm up and over, and we'll just take a little side bend. So just nice little supported side bend here, really pushing through your legs. You can think of pushing through your heels. Feel those outer hips that you just activated a little bit here. And so gravity is kind of constantly working against us. So a really great way to find some movement through the spine is twisting and side bending. We'll just do one more each way. Nice, then we're gonna go into a little flexion and extension. So you're gonna clasp your hands. We're gonna press the hands away as you round your upper back. So now I'm trying to push my shoulder blades apart, and then I'll come up to neutral, just kind of find a place that's relatively stacked here. Pull your elbows back and lift your sternum. So now I'm retracting my shoulder blades. Now we're kind of coming into how the ribs, let's do that 2 more times, how the ribs and the shoulder blades play together. So we're rounding our upper back, coming into neutral, and then pulling the shoulder blades together as you lift your chest. Do that 1 more time. So my shoulder blades actually separate from my spine. So they're spreading. I'm getting this nice stretch. My spine flexes. And then I'm gonna pull my shoulder blades back to open my chest up. And take a couple shoulder rolls here. So just rolling up and back. It's kind of building some awareness. Rib cage and shoulder blades play off each other. So it's a huge component of our postural stack. We want them to move separately. Let's reverse that roll. So go back to front. You know, we're getting really deep analyzing all this, but fun to kind of think about how this applies to our standing posture as we take it down to the mat and isolate all this movement. So come to the back of your mat here. We'll take a couple roll downs. So find that nice stack through your feet that you found earlier. With active legs, should feel really stacked, like you can move in any direction. Back is long. We're just gonna nod the chin and see if you can curl through your spine. So rounding the back, bend the legs if you need. Relaxing the back of the neck at the bottom, and then pushing through your feet. Now, if you noticed your weight shifted in your feet, can you find that centered position again? So you got really even weight here. Push through the feet and then scoop to come all the way back up. And then let's just take a nice stretch up to the ceiling because it feels good, finding some space between your ribs and your hips. And let's do that 2 more times. So as you roll down, can you stay in the same place in your feet? So your legs should feel pretty active here. Yeah, that looks awesome. Nice, you guys. And then relaxing the back of the neck, pushing through the feet to roll all the way up, draping the spine. and sweeping the arms up. And on this next one, we'll come all the way down. So we'll actually walk ourselves down onto our mat. If you need to fold your mat for your knees, feel free. We're gonna come into a quadruped, so figure 4 here. And so let's kind of connect in with some of those pieces here. So the first one is our shoulder blades. So I've got my wrists underneath my shoulders. With straight elbows, I'm gonna let my chest fall through my arms, my shoulder blades come together, and then I'm gonna push with my arms to press them apart. So it's a kind of a drop of my ribs through my arms, and then I'm pushing using my chest and my lats here. Let's take a couple more like that. And can you isolate just your shoulder blades versus your back? So it takes a second to kind of think about, okay, how do I, sure, my spine's gonna move a little to react, but can I really isolate those butterfly bones on my back? Yeah, nice. Okay, so now as you push away, let's add the spine. I'm gonna do a couple of cat-cows here. So you're gonna round the spine looking towards your knees and your thighs, and then extend the chest and open the sits bones. So now we're kind of integrating this, right? Your shoulder blades are also participating. They're supporting you. So as you round your spine, they're spreading. And then as you extend, they gently retract a little bit here. Just kind of feeling the differences in the different places in the body. Let's do one more here. Nice. And so we also integrated some pelvic movement. So find your pelvis here. Your tailbone's reaching long, crown of the head's reaching opposition. We're gonna sweep one leg back. And then without letting your mid back sink, so our abs are lifted, we're pushing out of the arms. See if you can float that leg up and then just tap it down. Nice. So now we're playing with, can we stabilize through the trunk? Definitely some shoulder work here. Can I check in with where that head is, where the eye focus is, as we move that thigh in the hip socket? Nice, one more here. And bring that back in, and let's try the other side. So kind of re-stabilize if you turned into a little bit of a banana, and then you're gonna float up. So I'm pushing out of my supporting limbs. Core is drawing in. You can imagine kind of like you're lifting your organs towards your spine. Keeping an eye on that neck position. Nice, let's try 2 more, opening up the front of the hip. Nice, last one. And then come on in, we're gonna take a couple rotations. So you can bring your left hand slightly more towards center. You're gonna push your right hand forward, open your chest out to the side, sweep it back, and then replace the left hand with your right. So let's take 3 on each side. See if you can add your eyes to get a little bit more rotation. It's a little harder in this plane. So it's okay if you find your hips moving a bit here. And then see if you can keep a continuous breath. So inhale or exhale, doesn't matter, as long as you're breathing the whole time. Use that bottom arm to facilitate just a little more rotation. Nice, last one. Awesome. All right, you can cross your ankles, come on to your bum here. So we'll play with our pelvis movement a little bit here. So you're gonna take that ball, if you've got it. If you don't, no worries, you can do it without. You're gonna put it in between your thighs. So we're gonna try to sit upright as much as possible. So tailbone's down, right, crown of the head is up. You can have your hands underneath your thighs, and then we're gonna move the pelvis away from the thighs. So here's a roll down. So we're gonna roll back, flipping the pelvis, your tailbone lengthens towards your heels. We'll go until your arms straighten, essentially. Give a little squeeze to that ball if you've got it, and then exhale, you're gonna curl forward. Okay, so we'll do that a couple more times. So just getting a sense of, here's my pelvis upright, tailbone's pointing down. As I roll back, your tailbone's gonna rotate towards your feet. So it flips to like a lying down position. And then you exhale to curl forward. Okay, so we're doing the same piece that we kind of talked about earlier. It's disassociation, thighs and pelvis. They get to move away from each other. Good question. Yeah, so when you roll back, you'll get a little bit of flexion in your upper spine just because you are rolling back. If we go up with a straight back, I'm gonna sort of like torque a little bit in my low back. So we don't wanna do that for this exercise. You're gonna keep your C curve and you're gonna flex from your ribs and curl forward. That can answer the question. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with a vertical spine. It's a ton of work. We do need our back to be strong. So like our spinal erector muscles. But for this one, we're going to focus more on core. Yeah, good question. I love questions. The masks make people not want to ask questions. Questions are valid. Okay, so no hands for this next one. We're going to roll back and stay. So find a place where you feel like, okay, I can keep the curl without flattening my low back. We're just going to reach one arm up towards our ear and one arm to our hip and then switch. So we'll exhale as we sweep, just so we feel like we can keep the core nice and tight. Yeah, and so now we're challenging shoulder blade movement. So can you find those shoulder blades, right, that you warmed up standing, and can you feel them moving on your ribs? Obviously, it's way more core work this way. Yeah, nice. Try one more each way. Awesome. Last one. And then take a breath in, curl forward on your exhale. We're going to do one more with a little twisting. So we'll roll back again. You can bring your hands together. Again, maybe not your lowest. Squeeze that ball. So this is going to help you stay centered through your hips. You're going to exhale to twist, twisting at the waist. Inhale through center, and then exhale, twist the opposite direction. And if you notice your knees shift, see if you can squeeze the ball equally and almost let the weight shift more towards the direction that you're turning. Because usually we'll try to shift away. Yeah, easy exhale. Nice. Last set here. Exhaling to the right one more time. Inhaling and exhaling to the left. Yeah, hopefully you feel a little bit more core. And then you can curl all the way forward. Nice, take that ball out for a second. Let's do a little windshield wiper. So you can either have your hands behind you, or you can go no hands. Feet a little wider is usually easier. Let your legs turn in and turn out. And so with a lot of our arm stuff in Pilates, especially when we're not doing like big weights or anything, when we don't have a lot of shoulder range of motion, we tend to use our ribs. So part of what's cool about Pilates is you're doing all this ab exercise, all these ab exercises where you have to keep your trunk really stable and move your arms. So it's like teaching how do we keep our ribs from popping and access our shoulder movement from our shoulder blades. So it's pretty neat. Once you've done a couple there, you can bend your legs again, bring yourself back, flop that ball back in if you've got it. And then we're going to do a nice slow controlled roll. You can have your feet a little further away. We're going to roll all the way down, hands on your body or hands forward. And just nice and slow, a couple cycles of breath here, squeezing that ball, go as slow as you can. And then once you're all the way down, you can pull your feet closer to your bum. Okay, so we're going to do just a couple of presses to start. We won't roll up just yet, but we're going to lift our hips into a shoulder bridge. You're going to have your hands down and your hands up to the ceiling. We're just going to exhale, push through the feet, lift the hips. So this is like your squat, right? Or your flat back that you played with standing, and then release. Hands at the hip crease can be really nice too, because you can feel, okay, right, I'm pressing up. And then just like I got karate chopped at that hip crease, I'm setting the bum back down. So core is definitely on to support the back. As you push through the heels, you should feel some glute and hamstring turn on here. If you feel this in the knees, you can walk the feet either a little further away, right? Maybe ditch the ball and go wider with the feet. But I would say check in and notice if you're wanting to tuck. So the position is kind of an illusion. It is slightly tucked, but we don't want to overwork our posterior pelvic floor. So it should feel like a lot of core. We're not coming up any higher than our shoulder blades. And on the next one, let's actually stay up. So we'll stay here. Take a couple squeezes on the ball. So when you squeeze that ball, if you've got it, and if not, you're taking little pulses in without your ball, should feel like some outer hip work as well as some inner thigh work. And keeping the hips nice and stable, right? Both sides of the torso long. My abs are on just to make sure I'm not popping my ribs. We'll go for 2 more squeezes here. And then stay. You're going to drop your hips just a little bit and then pulse the hips back up. So little tiny break and then exhale to lift. Nice, pushing through the heels. Should feel like the glutes are starting to turn on, hopefully. Yeah, 3 more here. Just checking in with the breath, easy through the back of the neck. We're gonna stay up on the next one. So you're in your top position. Hopefully hips are feeling a little bit more work. Sweep your arms to the ceiling if they aren't already up. Right arm comes out to the side to a hover. And then exhale, draw that arm back up. we'll switch sides. So left arm comes out. So as you're doing these side to sides here, we're allowing the shoulder blade to move so the chest can open. And can you just keep that nice isometric hold? So we know isometric, which is a hold like a plank, right? What we're doing right now with the hips is the best way to build strength. Eccentric is second, and then concentric, like your bicep curl action, is going to be the kind of least effective. We'll try one more each way. So one more to the right, one more to the left, and then you can sweep your arms all the way overhead. Just let them rest on the ground, and then roll your spine all the way down. Nice. You can take that ball out and then take a little side to side here, either holding on to the thighs or the shins, massaging that sacrum. So we'll go into a little core work. We'll take that ball, we're gonna lift the hips and put the ball underneath the bum. If you don't have a ball, this is just toe taps. So the ball just kind of makes it a little more exciting. You just wanna make sure it's not under your low back. So much more under your bum here. We don't wanna arch through the low back. Your core is engaged. So we've got TA and obliques. The idea is as we float a leg to tabletop, we'll exhale here. Here's that same hip crease. So I'm practicing the same movement. My pelvis and thigh will alternate sides in our marches. Pelvis and thigh get to move independently of each other. And your trunk is keeping everything stable. So core is active. Obliques are on. If you notice you get a lot of quad work, see if you can find your core as the initial lifter. So exhale, drawing the core in. You can try blowing out air kind of forcefully, like you're blowing out a candle. That can be helpful to feel that core. If this feels easy, float one leg up and then float your second leg to meet it. And then try your toe taps here. So it's a little more work, right? Just because now I'm on this unstable surface. If you want to make it harder, arms to the ceiling is another great way to kind of notice how is your trunk connected in with this work. And the whole idea of this exercise is, can I extend my hips? So can I open the front of my hip without opening my back and my ribs? And so my core is going to be kind of number one in charge of this. So ribs and hips drawing together. If this is still feeling easy, you can either reach your arms overhead. So now we're adding a little more challenge, or tap a little further away. So just by reaching further from center, right, I'm increasing that challenge. We'll try about 4 more like this. Just easy breath here, checking in with that supporting side, making sure that leg isn't rotating or side bending. Last one here. And then you can carefully lower one leg down, second leg to follow. We'll lift the hips and we'll roll all the way back down. Nice. Okay, so lower core is a little more warmed up here. You can bring that ball and put it in between your thighs. We'll do a little bit of upper ab. So hands behind the head to support. Elbows can be a little closer in if you feel tight in the shoulders. We're gonna come into imprint. So imprint is our flat back position where we lengthen our low back on the mat. We slightly rotate the pubic bone towards the chest. I don't wanna smash my back down, but I wanna use my abs to create this shape. So just kind of check in with the bum isn't over gripping. We're gonna take a breath in. As you exhale, you're gonna lift your head and shoulders, and it just gaze above the knees and the ball, and then lower back down, but really lengthen your ribs away from your hips as you lower. So if you curl up in 1 count, see if you can lengthen back in 2 counts. And we'll take a couple like this, supporting the head. If the neck ever feels kind of wonky, kind of check to see if you're nodding slightly before you lift, or if you're over nodding. So you should be able to fit your own fist kind of underneath your chin as you're lifting. So those are kind of the two things to look out for if you notice that neck feels pretty tense. You can use your mid back to support. So we're gonna make it a little more exciting on this next one. So what we'll do is we'll curl up on an exhale. We're gonna inhale and reach our arms behind our thighs. You're gonna exhale and pull yourself up a little higher. So you can get a lot higher here. Take a breath in. Exhale, reach your arms back behind your head, but try to keep the height, and then lower back down. And we'll take just 4 more like that. So we'll exhale to lift. Inhale to reach and exhale to curl up a little higher. Nice. Hold here as you breathe in. Exhale, reach the arms back behind the head, and then lower back down. Nice. You get that nice little challenge hold. So we'll exhale to lift. Inhale and exhale to pull. Breathing here, just holding, And then exhale, bring those arms back to support the neck. Nice, last two. Hopefully you're feeling the core just a little more. Exhale to lift. Inhale and exhale to pull. Reach those arms back behind the neck, supporting the head as you lengthen the ribs away. Last one here. Exhaling to curl up. Inhale and exhale to pull. Use those biceps. Keep your height here as you return your hands behind your head. Nice. Yeah, lovely. And you can take that ball out. Walk your feet a little wider and then play with a little windshield wiper here, a little internal, external rotation of the thighs. Nice, we'll do a little active rotation. So if you've got your ball, pop that guy back in between your thighs here. For kind of a version to keep the feet on the ground, you can just go up onto your tippy toes. You will still lift your top hip. That's kind of our modified version. If you're gonna do the full version, we're coming back into imprint. So that's your flat back position. My abs are what's creating this position. I'm gonna lift my heel, squeeze the ball, drag your toes towards your bum, and then float your legs to tabletop. So it's a different way to lift with both legs. Arms can come out into a T. And then I'm gonna let my top hip lift. So if I'm going to the right, my left hip lifts, my knees stay together. So they're gonna stay symmetrical without shifting. I'm only gonna go as far to the side as I can keep my opposite shoulder on the ground. Exhale, squeeze the ball, find inner thighs and outer hip, and then draw the legs back to center. So let that top hip lift. Now, obviously, if you go too far and it feels like you're really pulling in the low back, then keep that range within a range that feels okay. If you wanna make this less of a kind of twist, emphasized ab exercise and more of an ab exercise, then you can come up into your ab prep and then hold your crunch as you twist. So your range is going to be a little smaller, but it's going to turn up the core work a little bit more. You might notice, this one's kind of fun to play with, you might notice you have a little more oblique imbalance than you think if one side feels like it's going to barn door off to the side. It is not unusual. Think opposite rib, heavy into the mat. And then we'll try one more each way. Nice, curl up a little higher. And then you can lower head and shoulders, just hug your legs into your chest here. So we'll play with a little side leg work. You can take that ball out for now. Feel free to use it for your head if that's comfortable. We're gonna roll onto our side, whichever side works. We're gonna do a little bit of side leg work. So you do ball block, hand, arm long. So give yourself kind of a little stack check in the sense that, and if you've got something to line up on, that can always be helpful. My ribs and my hips are facing the front. And usually they like to separate. Hips might try to face the ceiling. You can always pad that bottom hip if you need. Flex both of your feet and activate your inner thighs. So quads are on. We're just gonna do a little float up and a float back down. Yeah, nice, you guys. So if you imagine where like a swimsuit line would be, just like we did standing, or where back pocket of a pair of jeans are, right? My hip actually is a lot lower. So sometimes we get kind of this waist hike that can lead to all sorts of other issues. We want to feel like it's just right where you can actually feel that thigh kind of falling into the hip socket. And this looks really good. Nice, you guys. And activating bottom obliques. So another way to think about it, instead of pushing the hip down, is lifting the core on the bottom side. Should feel like you can breathe pretty easily. Shoulders aren't tense, but just like a little oblique awareness. Nice. That looks really good. Try one more like this. And then let's actually bend the legs slightly. So we won't pull them up super far, but keep them far enough away from the hips that you don't feel like you're tucking your pelvis. And then you're just gonna float that top leg up. We'll go about hip height here. We're gonna do some internal, external rotation. So for internal rotation, allow as much movement as possible, right? Hips are still square, knee down, foot up. And then for external, you're gonna press back with that same glute muscle that you found a moment ago. So knee up, foot down, knee down, foot up. And just play with kind of finding your max range of motion. Here again, it's thigh moving independently in the hip socket. And sometimes when we lose range of motion in one direction or the other, right? It can just create imbalance. So trying to restore that being a good goal. We don't do a lot of internal rotation, but it's really important for our hip health. Do you feel some bum work here? Okay, nice. Good. Okay, we're gonna kind of a mean one. We're gonna take that leg, bring it forward to the front corner of your mat. Isolate glute med a little bit. So you're gonna turn your leg in as much as possible. Find that same spot. So here's your kind of some suit spot. And then from there versus your hip flexor, so kind of keep an eye on it, mentally cue into that. You're gonna lift your leg. Now you'll find you get to go a little higher with this one. So if you're nervous about going too high, this does just have a bit more range. And then you don't have to do a ton, go nice and slow and really pinpoint. So every time we're creating new mechanical pathways, it's that brain body connection that does it. So it's pretty cool to cue into new parts of the body, builds proprioception, creating new habits. So this is our balance glute, which is really vital for hip support. Try 2 more like this. And we feel it, right? Yeah. Nice. Yeah, give that guy a little, okay, thank you very much. Let's do a little extension before we do the second side. So we'll just come onto our front here. We're just gonna take, so 1 breath in to lift and an exhale to lower. So keep it really small. This is a hover. Arms are gonna be by your side. I am pressing down through the tops of my feet. So glutes are on, obviously one you're gonna feel a little more than the other in this moment. And then rolling the shoulders up and back. So I'm just hovering for 1 breath in, keeping my gaze just kind of right at the front of my mat. And then exhaling to lower back down, rest 1 cheek on the ground. And we'll just do that a couple times. So everything floats. And the idea here is we're just trying to get the whole posterior chain to activate. Core is definitely on. You're definitely keeping your floating ribs on the ground still. Long through the back of the neck. Just a nice little hover. So in our world and the way we're kind of programmed, we use our interior chain so much more. Right? We're always flexing just because of how we're designed. So getting a little extension is really, really important. And after this last one, you can just bring your hands down, keep your core on, push back, and take a child's pose. So just kind of round out that low back a little bit. If your extension work ever feels like back work, it is back work. So don't be too scared of it, but also should feel really even through the spine, right? Identifying dumping in the lumbar versus just back working is definitely important to protect your back. Thanks, you guys. We'll slide down to the other side and we'll do the glutes on the second side here. So we're feeling a little more even. So kind of find that alignment, whether you use a mat or a wall, checking in. My legs are really active, right? My hips and my ribs are both pointing the same direction. And that tends to be the biggest one. We like usually twist a little bit here. We're just gonna float that leg up and down. And the fun one, if you do have a hard time telling at home, doing this against a wall can be nice because you've got that feedback of the heel sort of scraping against the wall. You can always take a look down too and just see that you're tracing that line. So here's the outer hip, right? I can feel it literally where that bone falls into the hip socket. And then a little bit of bottom oblique. Yeah, this looks really nice, you guys. Yeah, so important. Side leg series is like, if you've ever been to PT, you probably got some version of side leg series. For good reason. And then on this next one, let's give that a rest. We'll bend the legs, but just a little bit. So not a super big bend. Just notice if anything shifted in your posture. You're gonna float that top leg up about hip height, and then we're gonna rotate, turning in and out. Take your time. If you find one side is either a little harder to figure out how to do it, especially internal rotation, we don't do a lot, or if it feels tight. So it's like figuring out how can I just allow for the mobility more than thinking of squeezing your bum. Sometimes the squeeze or the brace actually makes us lose the range of motion. So those muscles will fire when we put our body in that place, right? You lift a cup, your bicep will turn on. It doesn't need extra motivation. I'm gonna take a couple more here. So yeah, all of this hip stuff is so important, not just for right glutes and core, essentially stabilize our pelvis, but also really important for low back to have really strong glutes. And then you can lengthen that leg. We're gonna bring it to the front corner of the mat, turn the leg in, right, all the way from the hips. Notice if it's just the foot, find that same spot, really go there with your brain. So instead of your hip flexor lifting, it's right in that nice spot. Should be chatting, hopefully a little bit. And if you notice the leg starts to turn out as you go, just kind of refresh the turn in. Our body's super, super cool. It's really smart. It tries to figure out how to take the work away. So it's going to rotate into a position that feels a little bit easier. An easy breath here. Nice and smooth, little body scan for tension. Let's go for about 2 more of these guys. Do you notice any differences from side to side? Like one side feels stronger, weaker. Second side sometimes is just harder because we already used it as a supporting leg. You can give it a little rest here. We'll come back into some extension. So a fun version you can try if you have the ball or the foam roller, and you can also do this without. And I'll kind of show these 2 options. So for our ball version, and this is a little bit like shoulder mobility dependent, I can have my prayer emoji hands and I can do a little shoulder blade motion. So I've got my glutes are on, my core's on, head's just kind of looking down gently in line with my spine. I can plug and unplug my shoulders. And this is a nice one. So I can see my elbows, they're staying straight. I'm plugging and unplugging. And so this is giving me kind of a sense of similar to your thigh and your hip socket, right? Your shoulders should move, shoulder blades should move along your rib cage. We don't want them to be glued together. We can take this into extension, where as I drag the ball to me, I start to lift into a little extension. Now what I could do is I could come all the way up into a bigger extension if I can support it. If this is too narrow, propless, you can do it with your hands wide, still find that, or if you have your foam roller, if you need more width, you can do it on your foam roller too. So a couple options here, right? If all of those sound horrible, you can do flat arms and practice your little lift here. I'll go back to my ball version. So with this one, it should feel pretty even through the spine. So it should feel like, yeah, it's absolutely work through your back, but your shoulder blade should retract first. So it doesn't feel like it's only low back work. And so if that's something that feels really hard to keep out of the low back, stick with, can I find those upper back retractors? That's a really important piece, is getting that retraction to open up the chest. Once you've done 500 of those, you can set the ball off to the side. You can take your hands back by your ribs here and then press back, and we'll take another round of child's pose. We'll add a little twist to this one. So whether knees are together or apart, whatever is more comfortable for you, you're gonna reach your hands over to one side and then just push. So I'm pushing kind of away, hips fall the opposite direction. It should give you a really nice stretch through this whole side body. And if you can drop your head, really good for that neck to relax the back. You can always make yourself like a little fist pillow with the other hand. I'm gonna try the other side here. So kind of as you guys are stretching, I'll just yak at you because it's like my one skill, talking. If extension feels really hard, the 2 things that can make it feel better, getting the shoulder blades to move, so retraction. Great to do it like lying on a foam roller up against a wall, just feeling that retraction. Otherwise we get so tight here, it's really hard to extend the spine, right? When we're flexed, it's hard to extend. So we use our low back because it's a flexible place. Glutes, that's the other one. So stronger glutes, lots of bridging, you know, squats, all that good stuff. Nice, you guys. Okay, well, let's integrate this a little. So we'll come back to hands and knees. We're gonna do a little bird dog. We'll stick with one side. So we'll, instead of alternating, which we do a lot as kind of a warm up, we're gonna stick with one side. We'll do 6 in a row and we're not gonna touch down. So kind of your first version, if you need more support, is hands and knees on the ground and then coming back in. So that's version 1, right? Version 2, if you're feeling more stable. The version that we're going to try today is we're going to sweep out. So this is our starting position. So it's a little harder. So I've got to be stable here through my core. And then I am going to pike slightly. So here's my kind of cat position to make space to bring my knee and my elbow together. And then I'm going to extend back out to my straight neutral position. So we'll try that 5 more times. So tons of shoulder work, right? You've got those other 2 options if you need them. Tons of deep core and deep hip. Supporting hip, right? You felt that supporting hip work here. Nice, and just easy breath. Love and exhale. It's okay if you round the spine, it creates a little more space. Can you really pull your knee as high up to your chest as possible? Working that deep psoas. Yeah, lovely. And then you can come back to center. Take a moment here, just a little side bend from side to side. Kind of if you had a tail, you're looking towards your tail. We're going to try the other side here. So lots of stamina in this one. Check in with your stack. If we get a little here, it's going to be harder in the traps. We want to feel the work underneath. So bring yourself a little more forward over your arms. We'll try that second side. So we're sweeping out and then rounding to curl in and then extending nice and long. Yeah, lovely. Kind of full integration of all the stuff we've been isolating. If the hands get a little tired, find a little connection to your finger pads. So like you're squeezing the mat with your finger pads versus just kind of sitting into the joints. Yeah, nice. When you finish your last one, come back down here. Nice, you can press back, take a child's pose, flip your wrists maybe. So you got your palms to the ceiling. And take about 2 breaths here. See if you get your forehead to the ground. Finding some length in your armpits. And then start to walk yourself back. We'll cross the ankles. We're going to come into some full roll ups. Again, a little bit more integration. If you want, you can do ball for roll up. I'll show the first version. So knees bent if you're working on it, or if you need the support in your low back, it's totally fine. You can keep your hands on your body. And then you can use your hands again. So here's my inhale, exhale. I'm squeezing and I'm pulling if I need it. If I don't, obviously I can go full roll up, straight legs, no props, and just rolling back. So here's your half roll back. So it's the same motion in your pelvis that you did in your half roll back, and placing 1 vertebrae at a time down. And then I'm using that coordination. So inhaling and exhaling, my eyes are going to follow my fingers and curling all the way back up. Yeah, and go for a little stretch if that feels good. Let's take about 3 more like this. Yeah, nice. What I love about the ball as a prop in general, go for 2 more here, is it teaches inner thighs and outer hips and core to activate. So if you've got hip flexors that are pretty active, right, and that can be a postural thing or the sport that you practice, it kicks us more into our inner thighs, outer hips, and our core, which is really nice. We've got 1 more like this. We'll finish up at the top here. And then if your legs are bent, lengthen your legs out. You can get rid of the ball for a moment. Walk your legs out a little wider. It's okay if knees are bent. And then just take a couple nice, easy roll down. And then use your arms to support, lift your abs, and roll back up. So just finding a little spine stretch here. And anchoring through the sits bones. Let's just do 1 more like that. Just rounding forward. And coming back up. Nice. And then we do still want strong psoas and hip flexors, even if they're tight. So we're going to play with a little teaser here. So you can use your ball for sure. If that really helps you stay out of your hip flexors, then I would definitely recommend it. I'm not going to use it. We're going to roll back. So here's our half roll back position. We're revisiting that. Instead of our boat pose, this is still rounded. We're going to bring 1 leg up and bring it down. And I can use my hand. As I lift, I'm trying to lift my thigh. right? So this is knee extension. It's going to get us in our hip flexors kind of in a sticky way. We want to see if we can lift a little deeper, just more insertion point. And then if this is feeling okay, you're going to pause, keep that leg up. You might have to adjust by rolling back a little more to lift your second leg. Yeah, nice. So a couple ways to advance the pose, right? We know no hands is an obvious one. So it changes the balance a little bit. You can keep it here, totally. It doesn't mean you don't have to keep with what we're doing. You can extend the legs, way more deep core. You're adding a lot more load. You can also reach the arms either up or out. And same idea, so I'm challenging this again. So we're integrating like all of this stuff, full body. We need really strong hip flexors, even if they feel like they're tight. We'll hold for 3. This is like your plank for 2. And 1, whoo, and then you can come back down. Nice, take a little windshield wiper again. You can walk your feet out a little wider. And then let's come into a reverse table. So if you're not doing a reverse table on your wrists, you can come back down and you can do your shoulder bridge. So just like we did at the beginning. For a reverse table, I would do fingers either out to the sides or back so that your shoulder heads are in a good position. So you're gonna roll your shoulders up and back. I'm pushing through my heels and I'm gonna lift my hips up. If you're tempted to let your head hang back, see if you can keep it kind of on the diagonal where the ceiling and the wall meet. And then see if you can push through your heels even more. And this pose is just like your teaser. So there's not really like a resting. So if you start to sink into your shoulders, can you push out of your arms just a little more? And we'll just hold for 5, 4, 3, still breathing, 2. And on 1, push out of your arms even more as you lower your hips back down. Nice. Yeah, so just a little opposition there. Let's roll all the way back down. So 1 nice roll, slow roll all the way back down. We're gonna pull our right leg into our chest. You can keep your left leg bent or lengthen your left leg. We're gonna clasp the hands behind our right thigh, pull the knee into the chest, flex the foot, and then you're gonna take a couple of knee stretches here. So I'm just trying to kick my heel to the ceiling. Now, if your leg doesn't get straight, doesn't really matter. You're using your arms to brace to get a nice stretch here. So we know when we do active mobilization, we retain more of it versus like if you plop into the splits and just take a nap. This is a bit of a sciatica stretch. So if you want to point your foot, same hamstring stretch might feel nice through the top of the foot. Feel free to take some like little toe crunches or ankle circles. We're going to take this into a little 1-leg circle. So kind of opened it up a bit here. Activate through your left leg. So for more support, it can be bent. I'm going to flex my foot, get my quad going, really press into the ground so my glute turns on. This leg is any level of straight. So what keeps your pelvis in the best position? Might not be straight, a little bend is totally fine. Arms are going to come out to the side. Here's the same piece. Can I move my thigh in a circle in my hip socket without my whole body going with it? So inhaling and exhaling kind of through that harder part where the leg is the furthest from center. You can keep your range of motion small. You can keep the speed small or opposite, make it a little harder. Change the range and the speed. And then pause and center. Kind of do a little check here. Is hip hiking? Is body getting kind of out of whack? And then reverse it. So inhaling and exhaling. The more you can cue into your hip muscles, the less core work this is. So it becomes a little bit more like another glute exercise. Definitely obliques are working, but you can really take a lot of the work out of the core and put it into the hips. Nice, and you can bend that leg. Let's let the leg cross the body. So my right leg is going all the way across, either keeping it bent or lengthening it away, and then sweeping your right arm in opposition. So a little passive twist here. You can kind of work your rib cage open, shoulder blades, get a little flatter to the ground, maybe turning the head. And take about 3 breaths here. So imagine if you had an inner tube around your waist. You're filling that inner tube with air. Breathing in twists is really tricky. We know that breath changes our fascia, so good to practice breathing into stiff places. It'll help hydrate that area. And then just gently bending that leg back. You can give it one more little squeeze or a little circle here. And we'll try those knee stretches on the other side. So we'll draw the left leg in, right leg bent or long. So whatever feels better in your pelvis and your low back. And then you're gonna do some knee bumps here. So again, you're using your arms to brace so that your hamstring is really having to work here. And just for yourself, kind of noticing if it's hard to get my knee to my chest, the restriction is probably more at the hip versus if you can bring it up pretty high and then you can't maybe straighten it as much, it might be a little bit more along this line. So kind of fun to notice the difference from side to side. Feel free to point, take some circles, toe crunches, right ankle mobility again, connected to hip mobility. And once you've done a couple of those guys, so you can bend your right leg if you want more support. If it's long, flex it, push through the heel to get your bum on, quads engaged, arms come out to a T. Let's try some circles here. This leg can be any level of straight. We're gonna inhale and exhale, or any level of bent, I guess is the better way to say it. And can the thigh just move in the hip socket without the whole body moving with it? Yeah, nice, you guys. Pause at the top here, kind of check in. If we got a little bit wonky, and then we'll reverse our circles, inhaling, exhaling. If the hip is popping, it's not necessarily a terrible thing. It probably means it's not centered in the socket, or maybe it's a little rotated. So see if you can circle without letting it pop. And so that'll be activating the muscles that are maybe not working as hard, which is maybe why it's popping. And then you can bend that leg. We'll cross it over here. So you can either keep it bent or lengthen it long. Left arm comes up and opens out for a little twist. And just easy breath here. Again, that kind of imaginary inner tube. Maybe even closing your eyes and kind of noticing where it feels really easy to breathe and where it maybe feels a little harder. And again, using that brain to body connection, kind of sending your intention, even if you don't feel like anything's changing, the mental intention can really change how your muscles move, which is pretty cool. And then on this next breath, keep your left ankle, you're gonna keep it on top and hook it over your right thigh. So we're in a figure 4 stretch here. Take it however you like. So maybe it's a twist from side to side, kind of just pivoting. Maybe it's drawing the legs up. You're actively rotating and pressing that top thigh back. You can use that elbow to gently kind of assist. If little circles in the sacrum feel good, giving that hip a little moment. And then we'll uncross the left leg, cross the right ankle over here, kind of reset the hips. Again, play with any of those variations on the second side. You might find you have a different urge from one hip to the other. If you've got some imbalances, just gonna use this to explore what feels the best for you. And then you can uncross that leg. We'll take a couple of rock and rolls here. So you can have hands on the shins or behind the thighs. We'll kind of roll up and down the spine a little bit. We're gonna come back to standing. So we're just gonna see how kind of that stack plays out after doing a little bit of movement. So a couple ways you can get into this. You can come into hands and knees, right? You could down dog and then come up. You can also just push yourself back into a little crouch and then roll yourself up. You've got a couple options here. And then we're just gonna play for a moment, just kind of feeling our stack. So come back to that first position where you had your feet underneath your hips. Yeah, you can always come off the squishy, kind of finding, all right, little awareness front to back. Knees, where's my pelvis sitting? Where was it sitting earlier? Does it feel a little bit more neutral? Like I've got tailbone lengthened, low back lengthened, right? Where are my ribs? Maybe a little more forward. You could do a test, right? You foam roller if you need it. Take a heel raise. How's my stack feel? Do I have to adjust a lot for it, or does it feel like that was a little more accessible when I lower down? Try that again, little heel raise. Just kind of checking in. Okay, maybe my ribs aren't popping as much. And then let's try a couple roll downs. So just like at the beginning, Can I keep my weight even as I nod my chin and roll down? Is there any more mobility in my shoulders or my spine or my pelvis? And then checking out the weight at the bottom, pushing back up. Maybe more awareness of inner thighs now. We'll do a nice little sweep of the arms up and over. Nice, and let's just do that 2 more times. So really letting the head relax, right? And we know what's coming. We've got 2 more roll-ups. Can you ungrip kind of right at the base of the skull? Maybe closing the eyes. Pushing through the feet here, draping the spine. We'll do one last, no rush. You don't have to move at my pace. One last roll down and roll up. And on this last one, if you want to challenge, when you come back up, try a little heel raise. So see if you can keep the weight even through the full roll up. And then just gently find a little heel raise at the top. And so there's a lot of postural stabilizing going on there. Yeah, nice. Awesome job. I'll leave you guys there today. Yeah, thanks for coming. Let me know if you have any questions. I can attempt to answer them. Yeah, nice to see you. Yes, if you want to grab, it's kind of hard to see, there's just to the right of the foam rollers, there's a stack of cloths and spray bottles, and then above it is the discard. Thank you. Have a good weekend.